evening, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. I hope you guys are well. Please do say hello if you're on board. Let's just get the webcam up. Just 1 second. Hi guys, how are you doing? Just give us a yes if you can see us okay, if you can hear us okay. Let us know if all is good on your side. Welcome everybody. We've got a good number on so far. We're expecting a few more. People will probably join us as we go along. Hi, how are you doing, guys? Thank you for starting to comment. How's your day been? What have you been up to? Have you been working? Are you preparing for exams? Probably not if you're CCTing, but what have you guys been doing? Are you currently on call? Are you at work right now? Are you at home? Are you at night? Let me know what you guys are up to.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. Great to see some answers coming through.
Hi Asma, hi Abby, hi Jitan, hi Rachel. How are you guys doing? Normal working day? Yeah, most of you, I guess, are on normal working days right now, particularly if you're due to CCT pretty soon. Welcome if it's your first webinar with us. Welcome back if you've come to many previous ones before. Just give us some yeses, guys. Are you hearing us okay, seeing us okay? Are you seeing the slides change? If I change slides right now, just give me a yes and let me know if you can see the webinars. Sorry, the camera's okay. Yeah, excellent. Hi Akib, how are you doing? Hi Jennifer, hi Raja, hi Amina. Good, fantastic. We've got quite a few on board now. Thank you guys for giving us your time this evening. Hope it's going to be of some value to you. We're going to be covering a lot of core things that you guys may or may not have thought about before CCT, certainly things that we didn't think about before our CCT, and hopefully can add a bit of value to you guys. But I think we should get started. We've got enough people on board now, so welcome to everybody. A few things about chats. We can see everything that you guys are saying. Hi Noah, hi Sarah, hi Umara, great stuff. We can see all of the stuff that you guys are typing. We keep the chat hidden because it does get quite busy, so we can see everything that you are writing to us, but please don't worry that you can't see what you're writing or other people are writing. We tend to do that on our webinars because it does get pretty chaotic. So thank you for everybody who said hi Halimat. Good stuff. Okay, and another disclaimer, I should say, our little ones are currently asleep. We have a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old. So if they wake up, we've got the camera on. So one of us is going to have to run. Apologies. I hope that is okay.
And we'll be covering that today as well, about work-life balance and how important it is.
Absolutely.
So, you know, we're practicing what we preach.
Yeah. So, and I get that when I'm teaching on webinars, you guys often have to run off and do that kind of thing. So we're both here today, so we're going to have to do that if that happens, but hopefully it won't. So where are you guys? Let us know where about geographically are you. I guess most of you on this webinar are in the UK, but let me know where in the UK, where's the spread, where are you all about? Thank you guys. Please don't claps coming in.
Yeah, thank you ever so much.
That's really kind. So those of you guys that know Pooja got, I just read Peterborough. I'm in from Peterborough, so I just read Peterborough. Pooja has recently this week been offered a fellowship at the Royal College, so she's been awarded the fellowship FRCGP. So thank you for you guys who are putting their congratulations through. So we've got Peterborough, we've got Nottingham, we've got Darlington, we've got Syria, fantastic. We have got some international people on right now. Birmingham, Hartlepool, High Wycombe, Kent, London, Birmingham, Manchester, the usual places, I guess. Solihull, that's near us. Where else have we got? Thank you everyone for saying congratulations.
Yeah,
so love coming in through for you, Pooja, which is great. Fantastic. The people are all over the UK, which is brilliant. Good to see a range of geography on tonight. So you can say, Pooja?
Yeah, just one thing for those of you who have logged on, and if you think any of your friends or colleagues may find this webinar useful, please do share the registration link. We want to help as many people as we can because, as we said, we want to be sharing the 10 things we wish we knew before CCT. So please do share the registration link with any friends or colleagues that you feel may benefit from tonight's webinar.
Yeah, good point. And we'll try and find the link in a second and put it up. But thank you guys if you've done that already. Let's jump into the first poll, then, well, the only poll of the evening so far, because we want to get straight into the nitty-gritty. But let us know what career stage you are. We know where you guys are based now. We know some of you guys are in the UK, some of you guys are abroad. Good stuff. Okay, 75%. Let's close that down and see where you guys are in training. So, as expected, 65%, so roughly 2/3 of you are GPST3s, and I presume the majority of you guys are going to be ending in August. Some of you guys might be out of sync. We've got about 16%, so 15% of you already GPs, so you may well be new GPs, you may be GPs who finished within the last couple of years. I hope it's going to be of some value to you. Some GPSC2s thinking ahead, which is great, 10% of you. And some of you guys are not even GP training, so maybe you're in different careers, but you guys are well ahead of the game. So it's good to see you guys on board. We have another webinar next week for those starting GP training, so hopefully that'll be of some value to you as well. But good, great to see a good spread. And as we thought, 2/3 of you are due to finish at some point. So let us know in the chat, guys, when are you finishing? Are you August finishers? Are you finishing next year? Give us a bit of an idea as to when you are finishing.
Or are you finishing in the middle because you've taken leave? Could be maternity leave, could be paternity leave, could be any reason that you've taken a break in your training. So please let us know when you are due to finish.
Okay, most of you are saying August, which is what we'd presume, but there's a couple saying different times as well. Fine.
Okay.
Okay, guys, so for those of you who are finishing GP training, let's just get a bit about where your mind is right now. In one word, try and sum up how you're feeling about being an independent GP. So this might be in August, it might be in a couple of months' time, it might be next month now, isn't it?
Yeah,
next month, wow. Okay, so how are you feeling about being an independent GP? One word, let's try and sum it up and see if it matches how we felt before our own CCTs. So some of you saying less than full time, finishing in March. Okay, great. So when you're finishing, what do you think, guys? What's your mind saying about independent general practice? How's it feeling? Feeling excited, worried, scared? Let's hear. So we've got anxious, we've got exciting, good, worried, nervous, tense, excited, mixed feelings, scared, daunted, overwhelmed, excited, good. So there's a big range actually. Pretty much how we were feeling, right? A bit of a mixture between anxiety, worry, are we good enough? You know, do we need more training? Are we really going to be a GP? That kind of stuff is how I felt.
Well, I was a bit cocky. I didn't really think, am I good enough? Because I was quite happy that I'd passed all my exams and was looking forward to freedom. So yes, definitely agree with you there. Freedom was a big thing for me. So
freedom.
Definitely excited about that freedom to choose how many sessions, whether I want to be doing visits, etc. But we'll come on to all of that.
Absolutely. Good. So a mixed bag. And I guess it's one of those things that one day you feel one day you feel something completely different. So for those of you guys who don't know me, I'm Dr. Aman Arora. I'm a portfolio GP now in full-time med ed, lucky to also be a fellow at the Royal College, lots of previous roles, and hopefully you guys have come across me in other webinars before. Now you're at the end of the road, but just quick intro for Pooja, for those of you who don't know much about Pooja.
Yeah, so I'm a portfolio GP. As most of you know, thank you for the congratulations again. So recently been accepted as a fellow of the Royal College of GPs with a huge medico-political interest, and I'll be sharing all the things that I've learned from my various medico-political roles so that you're not making some of those common pitfalls as newly qualified GPs or even as GPs later on in your life.
So straight away there you can see my background. Yes, we were both GPs, but my prime side or passion was med ed. So my whole kind of career, my whole CV was based around trying to grab as many med ed opportunities as possible. Whereas if you look at Pooja's, it's completely medical politics. So that was her passion, and she followed lots of different routes and opportunities along that road. So it's a great example maybe straight away about how you can carve your own niche within general practice and how you can do your clinical stuff. But also, if you have a passion for something, you don't have to do something else, then there are so many routes available to you. So just a good overview straight away of some of the possibilities. So what are the aims of this webinar then? So the 10 things that we wish we knew before CCT. Hopefully you've thought about some of these things. If you haven't, then hopefully we're going to introduce you to them. What to start thinking about right now, how to create your own career even from this point onwards. How do you look after yourself? Because it's a super important thing that isn't often talked about, I don't think, when it comes to post-CCT life and those 2 webinar offers that we always do when we come to our webinar. So these are 2 things that are coming up today. The coupons will be coming in the middle of the webinar itself. So we have our GP Training CCT Max online course, which is a half-day online course that covers pretty much everything that you need to know for your post-CCT life, how to get things done, what to look out for, how to push yourself, how to sell yourself, how to promote yourself, all the technicals about the different types of general practice, as well as how general practice runs. So that's our GP Post-CCT Max online course, and also our medical exam stay-up-to-date flashcards. I know a lot of you guys use these post-CCT for quick reference, so we're going to give a discount on those as well. So they're giving coupons later on in the webinar for those of you who are interested in those. So these are 10 things that we're going to be talking about briefly, and please do chip in, guys, and please do put questions in, and please do put comments in, because this is your webinar and we do want you to have all of your queries answered. We're going to talk about need for choice and being out of depth, how to organize as a locum, how to get your money right, how to plan for tough days, how to look at self-promotion, how to network, what's partnership all about, what to think about appraisals, what to think, and all about the being prepared for constant change. So these are kind of 10 things that we're going to look at from the perspective that we found them, thinking about how can we help you before you jump into that big wide world of independent general practice.
And just before we continue, if there's any other burning questions and we see a general theme coming through, please put them through in the question box and we'll try our best to answer those at the end, because we want to make this as useful as we can for you guys today.
Absolutely. We've just gone a little bit paused on our chat screen. Just someone give me a yes, just to make sure the chat's working okay. Can someone just type a quick yes in the box or something, a tick or something? Yeah, good, excellent. Lots of yeses coming through. Fantastic.
Thank you so much, guys.
Okay, right. So let's talk about choice then. I suppose one of the first things that certainly hit me, I don't know about you, Pooja, is that when I first became a GP, I hadn't really thought about all the choices that I could make, I suppose, but then also needed to make pretty quickly. And we'll go through some of them in a second. But I don't know if you came across this, the amount of choices that you needed to make when you first started.
So that's a twofold question, really, because I think for you to make the most of the choices, you need to be aware of the choices. And that's one of the reasons why we've included it. And we go into more depth, obviously, in our online course. But I think the key thing is knowing where to find out about all these choices. So we'll go through some of those today.
Yeah, a lot of this stuff I didn't really think about when I was in GPST3. As you guys know, GPST3 is about getting to the end, ticking off boxes, getting your ARCP done, ticking off all your assessments, getting your exams out the way. And then I kind of got to the end and thought, right, okay, now I'm at the end. I'm really happy, but what am I going to do? I hadn't really had those conversations at that point. I know some trainees are very forward thinking, and a lot of trainers are forward thinking. They have these conversations in the last few months. I didn't really, so I still had to think about all of these things. And you know, one of the first things to think about is what kind of style work do you want to do? Do you want to work a particular way? Do you want it to be flexible? Do you want to be pretty fixed in your approach? Are you somebody who values a fixed protocol, or are you someone that is okay with lots of change and having things different week by week? So are you going to be a full-time clinical GP or a full-time GP but doing something else? That's really important. Full-time is not always just seeing patients. Full-time could be 3 days this, 2 days this, but to still categorize yourself as full-time working equivalent of 5 days. Are you going to work part-time, whether that's part-time, for example, 5 mornings or 5 afternoons, or 2 full days and 3 days off? Or are you going to do block work? Some people quite happily decide to work for 3 months and then take 3 months off, and then work 3 months and work 3 months off, and that's kind of their pattern, and they sometimes do that for their whole career. So trying to understand what is you, and there's no right or wrong here, but thinking about what might suit your style best, family choices, all that kind of stuff might be important. For me personally, I jumped into full-time. I was full-time mixed salary and mixed locum, so I did 2 days locum and 3 days salary, and I did that for a couple of years as we started building up the medical education stuff. Pooja, you're slightly different, I think, isn't it?
Well, yeah, we had a newborn baby, so towards the end of training, I don't know how, I had like 2 weeks of training left when I went off on maternity. So I was quite fortunate enough to have a month of training to get back into the swing of things. But as I said, I was looking forward to that freedom. And for me, it was about leaving a 6-month-old at home, as well as continuing with my GP career. And so if you look at those choices, some of them will include something like some of the schemes available. And that's when we talk about being aware of what's out there. So the GP retainer scheme, some of you may not be aware, but I certainly wasn't aware. If I was, I certainly would have done that when I CCT'd, because that was perfect. The retainer scheme is designed for those of you who may have dependents or care needs, and so you can't dedicate your GP life to full working hours. It's a maximum of 4 sessions. You need to apply via your deanery. There'll be information about the retainer scheme, so look into it. It may be the right thing for you, and certainly it'll support you. You get a mentor who supports you through the retainer scheme. Or
so just to make sure, that's 4 sessions a week, and they apply through their deanery, And there are a certain number of, I guess, places per deanery.
No, so you have to find a practice that is happy to take you on as a retainer. There should be no reason why they're not happy to take you on. You need to sell it, and we'll come on to that, because they get money for having you as a retainer. So if you sell it right, I can't see why any practice would not want to take you on as a retainer. And the fellowship scheme, so there used to be a HE fellowship, but now there's an NHS England fellowship. So all of your PCNs will be offering a fellowship, and it's really important to know about it, because the deadline for applications for a lot of them are within the next 6 to 8 weeks. So please look at your CCG website, have a word to your first 5 group, just ask someone, ask your TPD about the fellowships, and they vary from area to area. So this is an opportunity for you to get coaching, mentorship, as well as develop a interest. So that could be leadership, it could be in dermatology. The idea is that as a newly qualified GP, they want to embed you into the local network and ensure that you're not feeling isolated. The difficulty with that is obviously a lot of them are asking you to work full time, but there is flexibility in a lot of them, because they realize a lot of us are looking for that work-life balance. So yes, be aware of the opportunities, and we'll talk about where to get that information from. And the rest of them we'll come on to later.
There's a bit of crossover, isn't there, between fellowships and GPSIs. We were talking to a doctor called Dr. Tuba, who's doing a dermatology fellowship in the West Midlands, and his passion was to be a GPSI, so a GP specialist interest in dermatology, and he found the fellowship route the best route for him, because it gave him that kind of that plan that by the end of this program I'll be accredited in dermatology, but I'll also be doing my regular GP work. So some people will go down to the fellowship route, some people will just want to be a GPSI and say, look, I want to do 3 days a week of general practice, but I want to develop my own stream into the dermatology, and that's fine as well. So you might have your own links within a certain specialty. You might have connections with people who are already in the dermatological world or the minor surgery world or whatever it might be, and then you can go down your own route in terms of becoming a GP with a specialist interest. There's a lot of regulation for some areas about what does that mean and what do you have to do to be a GPSI, whereas some areas are not really, there's not really formulated plans out there. So you've got to kind of create your own portfolio in terms of developing interest, and therefore maybe one day you can use that and set up a service in a particular area. So if you're looking at a GPSI route, then yes, there are some things that are very much dedicated in terms of how you do it and what are the minimum requirements, whereas for some fields that are particularly not well trodden, you can almost make your own path and try and develop your own niche in a particular area. And the key thing about these is that general practice, of course, is getting more community based. So the more, if you do have an interest in something, now is the time to really start to maximize it, because in the future it's only going to get more and more needed that your skills as a GP can bring things into the community, and fellowships and GPSIs are great ways of doing that. Retainer scheme, have a look at, because that's something that not many people do know about, and then by the time they find out about it, they're probably a little bit too late to jump in. So have a look at that if that's something available in your area. And of course, private general practice, a lot of GPs now I see coming out of GP training are almost going straight into private general practice. So it used to be quite a taboo thing, whereas I think now a lot of people see that as a really a good balance between doing NHS work and private general practice as well.
But coming on to private general practice, once again with my medico-political expertise, don't forget to remain on the performers list. You need to do some NHS GP work. So if you're doing solely private GP work, there is a risk that you come off the performers list, and then you have to sort out your own revalidation, etc., for your GMC license to practice. So do your research, because private GP is not as straightforward as what it may seem. And if you're looking for more information about GPSI and whether you need to do any extra qualifications, we've got a detailed blog based on that topic.
I think that's the next slide as well, a bit about some of the extra qualifications that you might be able to do. But yeah, so some things to think about, and then you've got your more kind of general questions people think about. Should I partner, salaried, locum? There's typical pros and cons of each, and we'll go through some of those as we go through some of the questions later on. Portfolio GP, that's the buzzword, isn't it now? If you do anything apart from clinical practice, you're basically a portfolio GP. So some people are 99% portfolio, where they do very little clinical work and the rest is pretty much anything else, whereas some people might do one session of something else and they're still a portfolio GP. So it's very much a buzz term, but it just means someone who's doing something else apart from clinical general practice, I guess, these days. Digital GP, of course, with the way things have changed recently, lots of people are planning to just be a purely digital GP. They've picked up the video consult mode, they've picked up the telephone consult mode, and they love it, and that's what they want to do, pretty much 100% of the time. So that's certainly an option now, much more so than probably maybe even 18, 20 months ago. And then some doctors just do out-of-hours GP. If you've done your out-of-hours training as a GP trainee and you loved it, some people say, right, well, that's for me. I like the mix of acute, and the hours I like. I choose my own hours, and they basically just do out-of-hours for the next 20, 30 years of their career. So there are lots of options to start thinking about. You don't have to go down the traditional route of, is it partner versus salaried versus locum, although those three are still probably the most talked about because they're the most common. And then, of course, we've got your additional options as well. So if you wanted to be a GPSI, there's so many things you can get into, whether it's clinical or non-clinical. Med-ed, for example, was my thing. Medical politics was Pooja's thing. Medical insurance, medical legal, being a doctorpreneur, setting up your own business, having control. Aesthetics is a big one at the moment. So many things to think about. And that kind of leads us into the thinking about, do we do extra qualifications? Because a lot of people come to us and say, should I do extra qualifications? When should I do them? And there are so many these days that you can do, and there's so many diplomas and masters and courses and certifications that you can do. But the one thing we always talk about is you've got to have one of these two big P's, because if you don't have one of these two big P's, passion or plan, you're going to get into one of these things because someone has told you it's a great thing to do, and you're not going to have the drive to push it through. It's going to get busy, life takes over, and you're going to struggle to complete these things. Whereas if you've got one of these two P's, you can see yourself at least maybe pushing through those difficult hurdles when you've got clinics mounting up, when you've got things going on that are stressing you out, that you can actually push through. Because now these aren't things that you're now pushed to pass. At the moment you've done AKT, RCA, you kind of are driven to pass it because you're not going to get to the end without them. Whereas these things become a little bit different because they're kind of off your own back. So if you've not got a passion, firstly, so say, for example, I had a passion for med-ed, so I did the certificate of med-ed, I did some work around it, and it was pretty dry at times, it was pretty boring, and I was finding it pretty dull, but it's because I had that passion for med-ed, and I knew where I was going, I was able to get through those quite difficult modules and writing up all those those things that I can't even remember what I was doing then, but it's such a dry thing, but the passion drove me through. Some people do dermatology, for example, they think, oh, dermatology is a good thing to do, lots of GPs need to do dermatology, but there's no passion for it, so they kind of start the diploma and then they kind of fizzle out as they go halfway through because they never really want to do it in the first place. So you ideally want a passion, but at least if you don't have a passion, you've got to have a plan, because if you don't have a plan, if you can't see where this diploma is going to help you later, then you're not going to again have that drive to push through when you come up against those inevitable, there's blocks that come in the way. So for example, if you wanted to do a diploma in ENT, you didn't really have a massive passion for ENT, but you've got a plan in place that I can see in my local area. There's a big demand for ENT. ENT referrals are getting more and more. Maybe in 2 or 3 years' time, I can look at thinking about developing a community ENT service that I can save the practices locally a lot of money and make the patients have a much better experience. So because you've got a provisional plan in place, it may not work out, it will drive you through that diploma when it gets busy amongst everything else that's going on. So ideally a passion, but definitely a plan. And if you have both, then you've got a great chance of making one of these things work for you in the future, rather than just have a bunch of letters on your end of your name that doesn't really do anything for you. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. But one thing I would say is don't go down a rabbit hole. So I've achieved many medico-political roles without having an MSc in leadership. Of course, it's great if you have it, but don't let that stop you from wanting to do what you want to do. So once again, it's about learning how to negotiate and sell yourself. We're not going to have much time today to go into too much detail, but maybe you can negotiate some study budget for you to complete some of these courses if you take up certain roles.
Yeah, if you're in a good practice, you've got a good relationship with them, say, look, I want to set up a service in 3 years' time. Can you fund part of my diploma for X, Y, Z? Like, if you don't try, you don't get, right? And that's selling yourself, promotion, and we'll talk about that in a little while. But please, if you're going to think about doing extra stuff, do it with a reason. Either have a passion for it, where your heart is driving you, or have a plan where your brain is driving you. Without both of those, then sometimes you can struggle. Number 2, we had no idea how out of depth we'd feel. 100%. Like, I remember I did my first GP clinic as an independent GP in the same practice that I was a registrar. So I went in as an ST3 as my final day, and then I think I had about 5 or 6 locums booked from the next day onwards. So I remember going in the next day, exactly the same place, same patient, same whatever, but I just felt out of depth straight away. I was like, well, can I call my trainer? Can I go and speak to my trainer? What if I get this wrong? And I didn't realize how much that kind of thing on your shoulder about, okay, now you are an independent GP and the buck stops with you. I did not realize how that was going to make me feel. And if you can start to plan for that feeling, then it's not going to hit you as hard, I guess. I was kind of like, well, if I get to the end, I feel great, I'm a GP, job done. Whereas no one really told me that you're going to feel completely out of depth. I don't know if you had that.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I said, I was excited. I went into a new practice as a locum GP, and I remember that feeling of not having my trainer to look to if I wasn't sure about something. And the reason why we've put this in is that you may not feel out of depth, but if you do, it is completely normal. So, you know, just expect that that may happen to you.
By the way, guys, the questions are coming in. We are seeing the questions. We tend to go through stuff and then we come back and go to the questions at the end. So we're not ignoring them. I can see them coming through. Thank you for those. We will come back. So going back to this then, first few days, first few weeks, first few months, you've got to think a little bit about what's coming. Otherwise, it's going to hit you at some point. So expect firstly that you're going to feel a little bit alone. You're going to feel overwhelmed. It's very normal because if you expect something, it hits you less. If you just walk into something and think it's going to be fine and then it hits you, it feels 10 times worse. So just expect that, look, it's going to be tough. I'm allowed to feel a little bit out of place, even if it's working in exactly the same environment that I've been working in for the last year. Get some support. So form a CPD group early. We did this a little bit later on, certainly in my group. About a month or so into being GPs, we started thinking about, okay, let's get a group together. Yes, for CPD, because of course you have to do that for appraisal, but mainly just as a sounding board. Now, when you're in training, every week you meet up somehow with people in your group, usually whether it's practicing or virtually now, or whatever it might be, your PDs. Whereas when you jump into the independent world, everyone is just trying to stay above the surface and no one's really thought about this stuff. So think about it in advance, get a group in advance, plan it as a CPD group, but actually initially it's just going to be a sounding board where you can talk to somebody and realize, okay, actually you're struggling as well, or you didn't realize this as well, you didn't see how hard it's going to be. Get this in place now so that it's ready for you when it all hits, because it's going to hit at some point. Familiarity, really important. Don't just think, well, I've done my job now, trainers, thank you very much, PDs, thank you very much, I'm off, I'm independent, I can do what I like. Stay in touch with these guys. Whether you had the best relationship with them or not, they're the people that know you professionally best for the last 2 or 3 years. So it's really good to just stay in touch with them, because you need this familiarity. When you're off into that world of your own, you need someone that's comforting, familiar. And trainers and PDs, even though you may not have got on with them really well, there's people who have seen people jump off the cliff so many times that it's good to just touch base with them and just drop them an email or message. It's amazing how much that little support can do. And it's different when you're out of training. Like it's different to go to trainers and PDs when you're in training, and I get that sometimes. Whereas when you're out of training, you're on their side now. So it's different. You get a different kind of support, a different kind of feedback. And I know you stayed in touch with yours, didn't you? Going forward.
And I found it really useful. Sometimes my trainer is my sounding block, and I drop him a message. Pre-COVID, we used to meet up regularly, and it was great. So certainly, if you can, and you have that relationship with your trainer and PD, then please do that.
And this is a key one as well. Your confidence is going to drop at some point. You're going to see a patient, not know what to do, and think, should I be a GP? Like, I've forgotten everything. Oh my God, like this is too hard.
Yeah.
So have a plan for that. And I just think, what, on those days where I feel a little bit down from a confidence point of view, from clinical acumen point of view, just go over your notes. You must have had some notes for AKT or whatever it is. Just go over a few things, just read over a few questions. You realize actually it's all there, it's fine, I'm okay. And sometimes you just need that trigger. But again, if you can plan that on those days where I do feel a bit out of depth, I've got a few things I can just go and quickly skim through again, it's going to trigger things back and you're going to feel okay. But if you haven't planned that, then it can get worse and worse and worse. And before you know, it can get quite difficult if your confidence is really, really low. So these kind of things I would think about, and I certainly didn't think about them enough before I finished. And I wish I'd gone back and done a bit better in that aspect.
Absolutely.
Let's talk a bit about locum generally, because we've both been locums at some point in our careers, and most of you will do some locum at some point, right? It's the done thing at the moment, especially.
So one of the things you need to be aware of is that you're probably not going to be the same type of GP throughout your general practice career. You'll probably fluctuate between locum, partnership, and salaried, and that's completely normal. Yeah, absolutely.
So we cover this a lot more in the online course, obviously, but let's talk about some pros and cons of locuming. So some of the things might be obvious, some of them maybe not so obvious. So some of the key pros: flexibility, of course. You get to choose when you want to work, how you want to work, how much you want to work, how much you want to charge. There's so much flexibility available in locuming. You are your own business. You are your own business, and another business is contracting you to work a certain amount of time, right? So when you're being a locum, you've got to start thinking of yourself as a business, not as a person now, and that comes with flexibility and negotiation, which we'll talk about in a second. You obviously set your rates, so you can set them astronomically, it's up to you, but you may just price them out of the market, so you've got to bear in mind local rates, but you get to set your rates. You know, if you only want to work at a certain amount because you want to do a certain level of job, or you want to put, as you think my commitment level is X, so I deserve to get X, you can set that. You just got to demonstrate how that works for a practice, but you set your own rates, you're not dictated to. Of course, it gives you a chance to play around the field a little bit, you know, do some local practice, see what works for you. You might have been in only 1 or 2 training jobs for your whole career so far. So it's important to get it, sometimes to get out and see the other style of jobs, even if it's in another part of the city, another different population. It makes a huge difference on, you know, you've got to choose for the rest of your career where you want to work. Now, up to this point, you've been told where you need to work, and you may have no idea about what other working styles are. So you can get out and jump out, and we certainly tried lots of different practices, didn't we? Early on, and settled on maybe a couple, or at least a type of practice that worked well for us.
Well, I locumed for a couple of years, and I'm locuming currently, but it's not for everyone, and that's because you get no employment rights, so there's no sick leave. If you're feeling unwell and you're unable to do a locum shift, I'm sorry, you don't get paid. So you have to take that into account. There may not be regular work. So I know a lot of locums were affected during the COVID period because all of a sudden there was no need for locums, and you have to factor that in. Of course, COVID was a huge anomaly, but you have to be prepared for that. It can affect your ability to get a mortgage, because in order to do so, you need to show regular pay slips and regular income. So just have a word with your accountant. We'll come on to that later, but you need to think about these things. And it can be risky because you're not getting that continuity of care. You may not be able to follow up your patients because you're not going back there to locum. So you need to be aware of the systems in place to reduce that risk as possible. And of course, it can be isolating, lonely, because you're going into new places, you probably do your shift and you leave. So you may not get to know the team. And if you're doing that day in, day out, it can become very lonely. So there are pros and cons to locuming.
And even lonely if you're working in the same place that you worked at before, because you're seen slightly differently. You've got your set times, you've got a set number of patients, you go in, you go home. Whereas when you're a trainee, you don't do that. You're there the whole day. You go in a bit early sometimes. You're there after work. You're chatting to everybody. Yeah. Whereas when you're a locum, you're just getting paid for those hours. So you can feel a bit lonely, even in areas that you already know very, very well. But all that kind of can be seen as minor things if your sole aim is to earn good income, because you can earn good income as a locum. It will be usually better than a salary GP if you're organized and you book enough shifts, that is. But you've got to realize that yes, a good income can come with lots of other negative things, and people don't often think about these because they see this bit as the big bit early on, as well as maybe flexibility, and therefore they don't realize all these kind of things. So a couple of things to think about when it comes to locuming. So terms and conditions, very important, isn't it?
Absolutely. If you don't know where to get a template for terms and conditions, then please go onto the BMA website. Regardless of whether you're a member or not, there is a template that you can download and adapt. We talk about that more in the course. Confirm your shifts in writing. Please, 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 whatever you do negotiation-wise, always get it in writing. That avoids any sort of miscommunication, confusion. Everybody knows what's happening, and keep your shifts in a diary or some sort of planner to avoid being double booked. Ensure your own logins. Now, I don't think this happens very often anymore, but when I started out, and I know, Aman, when you started out, there'd be practices where your login details were Dr. Locum and password was Locum GP. Now, everyone who locum there would use those same logins. So when you saved your consultation, it would come up as Dr. Locum. So imagine a complaint coming in 5 years down the line and the consultation is by Dr. Locum. and the practice contacts you and says, actually, doc, it was you who was doing the shift that day, and therefore we think that consultation is yours, therefore you need to reply to this complaint. 5 years down the line, I don't know, I can't even remember consultations and what I've documented a few months ago, never mind 5 years ago. So having your own logins ensures that nobody can alter your consultation, which rarely happens, but you never know. And also it ensures that it is you that saw that patient, because it would be logged in under your name and your credentials. So that's really key.
Really important.
And develop a system for invoices and checking that you've been paid, especially if you're going to join the NHS pension, because you'll have a Form A, Form B, out of hours, you may have a solo form. It gets pretty chaotic and hectic. And for someone like me who's generally not organized, I really fell foul of that. So please, please, please develop some sort of system and plan for the tax bill. If you're going to be self-employed as a locum GP, generally keep some money aside, because you have to pay that tax in advance. So it may seem that you're getting a lot of money, but I don't know, keep 30 to 40% aside of your incomes.
I think we did 50%. We kept 50% aside.
50% aside, which is a bit of an overkill, but at least when we got our tax bill from our accountant, we weren't thinking, wow, where are we going to get the funds for that? So please do that. And also remember, a higher rate clarified, is that inclusive of pension? If not, then please get that in writing. And a higher rate, just think, why is that practice offering slightly more? In some cases, it may be because it's a crazy place to work in. Sometimes it could be just because they're a nice practice and they're offering you a better rate. So,
but then it's unlikely that post would be available because everyone else would have taken it already.
Yeah, potentially.
So why they're offering you a higher rate makes sense, doesn't it?
Well, you never know. There are, especially with hubs, you may get a higher rate, but
just question it basically. Think about it. Don't just think, oh, there's £150 an hour. Let's jump, because that what they expect you to do in that hour might be crazy.
Yeah.
And because you signed up to it, that's
and one of the things we talk about in the course is clarifying what a shift actually includes, whether you're a locum or a salary GP. So think about those things.
So lots to think about if you're a locum, because, and remember, you are a business. Just think of yourself as a business, and then you'll start to think, okay, businesses need to organize invoices, check, they need to have plats for taxes. Don't think of yourself as an individual, you're a business, and then you start to think a little bit differently. So
yeah, just to clarify on that, Aman keeps on referring it as a business. So the limited company question will come up, and we'll talk about that now.
But even not that, you are your sole, someone is contracting you to offer a service. So you are a business now, you're not a person. You got to think of it like that, and then it helps with the organization sometimes for some people.
Absolutely.
Good. We had no idea how important accounting and finance advisory is. So we touched on this already, but this is the advice part of it. And we jumped into it thinking, well, certainly I did, because I went into it first, that I can handle the money stuff, it's fine. And some people can, they can fill in their own forms and all that kind of stuff is fine. But you need to start thinking whether or not you need an accountant. And if yes, do you need a medical specific accountant, or are you happy with what we call a general accountant who can do kind of general things, or do you want somebody who knows the medical side inside out? Particularly for locuming, they'll get the whole IR35 and all the different forms that need to be done, because some general accountants won't. Or do you need it at all? Like I said, some people don't, but you need to be thinking about pension, for example. And is it right for you? If you're going to come out, what are the implications? Get somebody with some tax advice, some accounting advice before you make big decisions like that. Do you think about income protection? Have you thought about critical illness cover? If you're a locum, for example, these things are massive and are very often underthought about. Again, all this kind of stuff may be triggered off by having a conversation with accountants or financial advisors. So do you need to think about these things, not when it's too late, early on, when things are okay, you're in control, you're starting to get your income flowing in, make sure you've thought about these things at the right time.
Yeah, and all of these things are key regardless of the role. So yes, it's even more important if you're a locum or even if you're a partner, but even as a salary GP where you get a PAYE, so you think, oh, I don't need to worry about tax and things. Please, please, please think about it. God forbid you're unable to work. Yes, the NHS sick cover is good, but once again, it's about knowing your contract. and I'm sorry, we've got limited time, but it is something that we do cover in our blogs as well as our course, about knowing your contract inside out and making sure that you have negotiated good sick leave, whether there is any other added benefits. And as a salary GP, think about putting in the line, my pay should follow the DDRB recommendation, because a few years ago the BMA negotiated a pay increase, and if that was not in your contract, then there was a lot of discussion about whether practices should be paying their salary GPs that 1 to 2% extra. I was a salary GP at the time, and because that was in my contract, there was no need for any sort of discussion. I just pointed to where it was in my contract, and my practice said, fair enough, we're going to pay you that. So these are little nuances that you need to be thinking about early on to ensure, and also make sure that your contract says the start date of your NHS terms of service.
Yeah, super important things. And then a few additional things, I think, for locums, if you're going to be financing, thinking about finance, pension forms, make sure you've got those all sorted. You know what to fill in, when to sign, when to give them in. IR35, this is something that became a big topic maybe a couple of years ago when the rules all changed, whether a practice can, you know, it's all about how regular you do shifts, and can you be a long-term locum, and then if you can, do you come into the IR35 rule, and what does that, so that's something you need to think about if you're going to be locuming, particularly to one place regularly for a long time. Practice should pick those up. Limited company options, obviously lots of pros and cons versus whether you go as a sole trade or whether you go in as a limited company. Again, you need to get some advice on that, because there's cost to set it up. There's you may get differences in tax rates, but again, it's important to weigh it up based on how much you're going to work, how often you plan to work, and what your income is, for example, as to whether it's going to be beneficial to you or not.
I looked into that recently, and it was interesting to discuss that with my indemnity provider about how I'd be covered if I worked as a limited company. So a lot of practices will say avoid IR35 by invoicing us as a limited company. So please, as we've said, get some expert advice around this, because it may not be as easy and the right thing for you. So please do look around. Locum insurance. Once again, you need to be thinking about this, whether you're a partner or even if you're a locum. And as we mentioned before, don't forget about that tax bill, and have a fund set up, as we said, taking out a portion of your income aside with each locum payment.
Because you're so used to just having your pay where you pay and all the taxes dealt with, that when you just get your locum pay, it's like, well, this is my pay now, and you just spend it all, and then your tax bill comes and it's like 1.5 of what you need to owe, and it just throws people out, you know, to pieces.
It's a big surprise.
Yeah, massive surprise. So plan that in advance. 5, we had no idea how many tough days there would be, right? We had some tough days. I used to come home, you used to come home. It's tough days as an independent GP. How can you prepare and plan for that?
Yeah, okay, so it varies from situation to situation. I remember having a long day and then coming back to a toddler who was sometimes unfortunately unwell, or just wanted to be with me because they've missed me and I've finished late. And sometimes that can get overwhelming, because, you know, even as a locum, you know, you need to be thinking about wrapping up and protecting yourself as well as your patients. Even as a salaried GP, you may finish late, or even as a partner.
Definitely as a partner.
So, you know, you have to think about these things. You know, the long days, maybe you've had a tough patient that's taken longer to sort out. And that's why it's really important to know your go-tos. You know, so we don't like talking shop at home, but, you know, just airing out my frustrations with Aman would be helpful. For you, that may not be a family member, it may be one of your friends, but have someone where you can vent out.
But know in advance. Don't try and find them when you're stressed.
And don't let it build up. So go early. And have a plan in place for when you have had a couple of tough days. You know, maybe take out some me time. There's a lot of focus on well-being these days, and developing resilience, that little hot word. But it's about having a plan in place. You know, for me, it's about going out for a run to de-stress. For you, it may be something else. It may be a bit of family time. It may be negotiating so that you finish early and you get to put your kids to bed, but it's about understanding and recognizing your needs and how to ensure that you don't get burnt out.
And being overwhelmed doesn't necessarily mean you've had a bad, difficult, tough day. It could just be that you're overwhelmed with all the pressure of having to manage everything. Say you're a locum GP and you realize, gosh, there is so much to think about, all these forms, taxes, money. That can overwhelm you. The clinical stuff can overwhelm you. The uncertainty of where is my next shift next week going to be can overwhelm you. All that stuff can build up. And yeah, as Pooja says, know your go-tos early in advance. Go early when you get the signs, and have a pre-plan in place that this is what I'm going to do when I start to feel stressed, because it can help you spot it before. Number 6, we had no idea how much we had to promote ourselves.
Yeah, so we negotiate on a daily basis. We just don't realize it as doctors. You know, in a consultation, you're negotiating with your patients throughout every consultation, be it whether investigations or management. And so you've got to learn not to be shy in real life, okay? We're not very good as medics in terms of promoting ourselves, and it's something that we have to sort of develop ourselves. Okay, so I'll give you an example. When I decided to go into a salaried role, I was very confident with my CV. I was fortunate enough to have developed lots of medico-political roles at that point. And so I walked in and I said, look, I'm only happy to take this role as long as it does a few things. I need to be home for when my daughter needs me. So that means I'm only going to be working from X in the morning to Y in the evening, so that I'm there for my daughter. You know, I've got a huge dog phobia, so I don't want to be doing visits, but I'll compensate by maybe seeing extra patients. So it's about negotiation as well as selling. Why should they make adjustments just for you? And that's because I sell myself as being hardworking, making sure that I contribute to the practice, and make a positive impact for them. And once again, we've written about this in more detail, haven't we?
Yeah, we've got it in our blogs. But selling yourself is from the beginning, from your CV, from how you write your covering letter, from how you interview. All this we go through in more detail in the online course. But you need to do this. If you don't sell yourself, and you may be a better person on paper than the person applying with you, but they're going to get it because they've sold themselves better. So you need to learn skills about how to stand out, both on paper, but also when you're talking and you're doing interviews as well. Got to show confidence, easier said than done, but if you've planned and sold yourself well and done this right, then that should shine through. Enthusiasm is everything. Enthusiasm beats degrees. Enthusiasm beats roles that you've had. Enthusiasm can beat anything at the end of the day. And when I went for my first PD interview, I had nothing on the other guys. I'd never done a PD role before. I'd never had any med ed experience before, apart from just running Aurora med ed. I'd never done anything on paper that showed that I should get that PD role. But I just had masses and masses and masses of enthusiasm, and I just told them and sold so hard about how I could come in, how I could change things, how I could bring this in, how I could help here, how I could do this and that. And it just, they would have found it hard to not give it to me, even though somebody else had something on paper that had more credentials. So enthusiasm is massive, and whatever role you're going for, make sure you push it. If you're going for the fellowships, for example, they're going to be high competition. You've got to show your enthusiasm for the fellowship, because somebody else is going to take it off you. It's a dog-eat-dog world, right? And if you don't push, you're not going to get. You've just had 3 years of training, sometimes 4 years of training, where you basically fought to get in, and then you've not had to fight anywhere until the end. Now you're going to have to start fighting again, and pushing yourself, and enthusiasm can do that.
And part of that comes from doing your research, okay? So you can only sell how you're going to make a positive impact for someone by doing some research for the role that you're applying for, okay? So look at the practice, see what services they're offering, look at their population and see, is there something new you can bring to the table? Maybe it's a practice full of all male GPs and you go in as a female saying, look, I've noticed that you're full of, you've got no male GPs, no female GPs, and maybe this is what your patient population needs. You know, so do your research. Or it could be that you've walked in and you realize that you've got an interest in minor surgery and they're not offering that service, and nor are the local practices, and therefore you could set up a minor surgery clinic. Or maybe you have, as Aman said, no experience in anything, but hey, you're good at quaff. You know, no practice is going to turn that down if you're going to say, look, I'm going to really focus on boosting your quaff or improving things for CQC. You know, it's just about selling the idea of why you should be the one getting the job and not somebody else.
And this bit's key. How can I help you, right? It's so easy to say, I've done this and I've been a member of this and I got this score and I did this and I did that. This is my experience. Whereas if you're thinking about, okay, I can do this for you and I can do this for you and I can do this for you, it makes such a difference. So always think in that way and sell yourself. Don't be shy, and you'll get many more opportunities than probably if you just went in on paper and you were strong from that point of view.
Absolutely.
Okay, guys, we're going to have a really super quick break, but is this helpful so far? Is this working? Is it useful? Is it giving you some good ideas to think about? Give us some feedback before the next second half, just so we know that we're on track.
And I know we're running a bit behind, apologies, but we really do want to give you as many tips as possible.
And we'll catch up. We'll catch up a little bit.
Yeah, we'll catch up.
But guys, is it worth it? Useful, helpful? Give us some feedback. Good, good. I'm glad some ideas coming through. Excellent. Okay, fine. Right, let's jump into a really quick break. But before we do, as promised, we're going to give the offers. So the CCT 15 coupon is the one to think about tonight. CCT 15, that'll give you 15% off the online course, but also 15% off the stay up to date cards that you can use as reference in clinics. And I'll put links out in a second. So for those, so if you know what you want, then you can jump off and get them. We'll put links out in the chat. But a bit about the CCT course then. So it's a half-day course that you can get for 1, 3, 6, or 12 months, but the commonest one is 3 months, depending on when people are finishing. This is all the stuff that we finished, we cover. So some of the stuff that we've been talking about today, we go in more depth, but also lots more how to make decisions, how to push yourself, how to show yourself as someone who's better than somebody else, how to think about the finances, where to get the right information, basically everything that maybe you haven't had covered in BTS. That you maybe have to suddenly quickly think about when you come into independent general practice. So that's our online course. It's pretty, it covers pretty much everything that we wanted to know. And there's 15% off any duration if you want to go for it. Our clinical cards, I know a lot of you guys would have had these already for AKT and RCA and things like that. But if you needed a quick reference of guidelines that you want to keep in front of you while you're at practice, then this would be useful for you. So again, CCT 15 will get you 15% off the clinical flashcards. And one of the set of cards that you may or may not have seen is our brand new release of our pharmacology cards that we only released this week. Is pre-release at the moment. We get them in to us on Friday. So we currently have a 25% discount on pre-release purchase of our pharma card. So I thought I'd put these out here in case you wanted some quick reference for the common primary care medications that you're going to be prescribing, things like indications, things like side effects, things like breastfeeding rules, pregnancy rules, doses, for example. So if you wanted that as quick reference, then that's not strictly part of this webinar, but this week there is a Save Farm 25 coupon for those as well if you're interested. So I'll just put these 3 links in the chat right now. We'll take a 2-minute break and then we'll come back and look at another 4 things. Okay, guys, we're going to restart. I know a lot of you guys are on the website right now, but we've got a lot to cover, so we're going to jump in. The coupons are available till midnight tonight, unless they run out earlier. But I'm going to jump on in case, just so we can get a move on and carry on. Okay, number 7 ties in a little bit of what we've been talking about already, but we had no idea just how much of an importance networking is going to be. It's something that we didn't really envisage. It's someone that no one really told us about. Pooja had a lot of experience with this anyway through her medical political roles, and she'd learned how to network quite well, but it was different when you network in the GP scene, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And that comes with a bit about what we've spoken about already, about knowing about opportunities. So if you're not speaking to people around you, you're not going to know what's out there. And also it's about bouncing ideas from one another. You may find out about a new job opportunity through speaking to colleagues. You may find out about a new role. You may get some new ideas about how to, I don't know, keep yourself interested in the job. So it's always good to network. And when we say network, this could be in the form of first 5 groups. I know a lot of you have asked about how do I find out about my first 5. Unfortunately, that varies from area to area. Your first 5 group may not be very active, but on the other hand, your BMA group may be very active. your LMC may be very active, or your CCG. You need to be looking at each of these websites for your area to see what's on. Do they meet regularly? The RCGP definitely have a dedicated first 5 section, and you can get in touch and see if there's an active group there. But beyond that, you know, you've got WhatsApp groups. Certainly social media is a great place, and a lot of our trainees who have qualified continue to stay on our social media groups, and you may choose to do the same, but there are other groups out there. So that's what we mean by networking and finding out about various options.
Yeah, so there's networking within you guys, and that's why we talked about that CPD group that you want to really form before you finish, so that that's in place for you to do all of these things that we talked about, you know, give ideas about jobs, etc. But also then when you get into your, you know, you may be moved to a new area or a new practice, networking there through these organizations that will usually have channels that you can slot into. And you may have interest in one or the other, but just find a group so that you can start to stay on top of things. So the last thing you want to do is lose touch, become lonely, particularly as a GP, and then think as a locum, that is, and then realize that you missed out on XYZ because you were out of touch. So staying in touch, networking is super, super important, and we probably didn't appreciate how much of an importance it would be.
Yeah.
Okay, partnerships. Some of you guys have asked about partnership, and we've not been partners. I haven't, Pooja hasn't, but Pooja knows a lot about partnership through her LMC role, isn't it? You manage a lot of partnership problems, disputes. So, but we didn't realize how much there was to think about before considering partnership, because we did consider it at some point, but we didn't really look into it in the depth that perhaps we should have before we thought about it before. So lots of pros and cons, like with all 3 major facets of general practice. Generally good income, of course. It does depend. There's a bit of a caveat to that. If it's about, again, running an organization, isn't it? If you're not good and clear and have protocols in about how to run an organization, then maybe your profit is not as good as another practice, for example. So yes, good income with a caveat, as long as you're organized and you know how to run the business of a partnership. Property ownership may become part of the partnership. That's a pro. It could be a con as well. So you may become a partner of the practice, but then you may become a partner of the building and the property as well, which may have its own benefits going forward. Not all practices have that, of course, but it's something that may be a big pro. Some benefits, of course, if you're a partner, then it may well come, depending on the contract and depending on what that partnership has in place, there might be some perks that come with that. For example, certain fees may be paid, certain benefits, paid sabbatical might be within your contract, for example. But again, that varies from partnership to partnership. Of course, you get a chance to influence a lot of things as a partner, and you may really relish that chance to see how you can have impact. But you may be someone who just wants to go in and do your clinical sessions and not worry too much about how things are working, and that's fine as well. And of course, you have greater control and say on patient care. So I think those kind of the main things that people look at as pros, I guess.
Yeah, and once again, talking about opportunities, one of the latest pros is that NHS England has released a new to partnership scheme where you get paid pro rata as an incentive to become a GP partner. And it's only eligible to those of you who have not been partners before, which will be a lot of you. So look into that once again and see whether that will entice you to partnership. There are, of course, other things you need to bear in mind. This is just a really vague overview, but things to think of. You know, you have the contract, you have the GP contract, and therefore if everybody else in the practice retires and you're the only GP partner left, even if you have 10,000 patients, you are the only person responsible to provide good medical care to them. So that can be a lot of pressure, and that's why partnerships in the past has got a lot of flack, but there has been a lot more push to ensure people understand their partnership contracts before getting involved, or have reviewed their contracts beforehand. So make sure you get good legal advice before you enter a partnership. Yes, it's running a business of sorts, and it's even more pressurized because you're running a healthcare business. You're looking after patients, people's lives are at stake, and that's where the pressure comes in. So you need to think about CQC. You need to make sure that policies are in place. Have you got adequate health and safety policies in place? If somebody decides to go on maternity leave, you need to be thinking about risk assessments. If you're having issues with your receptionist, have you got your HR set up? You need to be employing staff. you need to be thinking about their pay structures, you need to be thinking about all of these things. And if property is involved, then you need to be thinking about, does your partnership income cover the rent that's due for the property? Does it cover the mortgage that's due for the property? And do you have a relevant share in the property? So if you're doing 50% of the work in the partnership, have you negotiated a decent share in the property to do so? And just like a locum, there are no employment rights unless you've stated it in your contract. So no maternity leave, no paternity leave, and a lot of people get caught out by this because they haven't looked into it or asked for it. And if it's not documented, then it's out there for interpretation. So these things are really important to get right. Another common thing, so I didn't deal with disputes directly, but at an LMC, so your local medical committee, where you look at issues affecting practices, you had to think about, you know, various disputes, and whenever a new partner comes on board, you should be updating your contract to reflect that, and a lot of practices have not done so. So you need to be aware of all of these things, and as Aman mentioned, it is a business, so if you're not managing the business well and you're not managing the practice well, then your income may not be great and your expenditure may actually exceed that, which is not good news all round. There are very, very few practices like that, but you do need to ask for the practice accounts before you get involved.
Yes, so certainly if you are thinking about partnership, there's a couple of things to think about before you think about this is the partnership for me. So go and think about the practice premises, understand, is there a buy-in? Do I need to put money in towards a practice, towards the building, for example? If I do go into a partnership, is the building going to be part of that partnership as well? Make sure you ask for partnership accounts, make sure you get an accountant to go through the accounts of that practice, because you don't know what's happened, how they run their books, is it viable or not, is it correct or not, and you don't want to sign up to something without knowing the account side of things. Do an informal visit, speak to staff, make sure you get a bit of an understanding about whether this sounds like or feels like a place that you want to be working for the next 30, 40 years. Do you find out why they're recruiting? Has someone had a dispute? Has someone left in uncertain terms, or has it just been a retirement? They're looking for another person to fill the void. Why are they recruiting at this point? Very important to find out that question before you jump in. Research it beforehand, like Pooja said. Find out whatever you can about that practice. There's a lot of information out there that you can look at, reports, UQC, etc. QAF. There's so much stuff that you can try and get hold of beforehand. And don't just go for a partnership because you think you should go for a partnership. Figure out why am I going for this partnership? Am I going to make my work-life balance better? Am I going because I want to boost my income? And what is the aim of going into partnership? And that will take some partnerships out and put some partnerships in. And when you're looking at what type of partnership do I want to go for, so make sure you plan that all before you jump in. But again, we cover that in much more detail in our courses, but just a brief overview to get in your mind if you're thinking about that road. Appraisal. Yeah, I did fear appraisal a little bit before I was an appraiser, so I started appraising other GPs, and I realized, okay, it's nothing to worry about really. But I remember finishing CCT and getting the first letter to say, or the first email to say, okay, your appraisal is due. That freaked me out. You probably less so because you knew a bit about it, I guess, by then.
Yeah, so in essence, appraisal is just a continuation of what you've been doing as a trainee. And in fact, I'd probably say it's less onerous compared to what you're having to do as a trainee, especially now. And actually in the current climate as well. So appraisals are very lightweight at the moment because of the whole COVID situation. So of course, we've done it based on pre-COVID to give you an idea of what sort of things to look out for. But the key things are planning, as you probably have been doing as a trainee, and you can defer your appraisals if you're going to go on a break. So I went on maternity leave to have our second little one. So I chose to defer my appraisal for a year. So just being aware of these little things can make a huge difference and make it less stressful for you. So just bear these things in mind. A lot
Yeah.
of these things you'll be familiar with as a trainee.
Yeah, all these stuff, CPD logging, PSQs, MSQ, we've done these since the beginning of training, haven't you? But the key thing is it's a meeting between you and your appraiser, and the appraiser's job is to make sure that you're basically okay to do the roles that you're doing. So you'll be appraised in the various roles that you're doing. So you'll be appraised as a GP first and foremost, but if you have any other roles like working out of hours or a gypsy or a trainer or something to do with medical politics, they'll also be appraising you for that as well. And it's your job to basically demonstrate that you are okay and up to date in all the roles that you're doing, and that's what the appraisal is all about. So you have 3 maximum with a single appraiser before you move on to a different appraiser, but you don't have to have all 3 with that same one. And they basically look at those 4 areas that are similar to the areas that you're being looked at right now as trainees, but there are only 4 key ones when it comes to appraisal. So the process is that your designated body is based on where you're working primarily as a GP, and your NHS area team will allocate you your first appraiser. Then when you get that message, you've got to book your appraisal. That's your responsibility to do so. Some appraisers, I used to email and say, look, let's get a date, but not all do that. So it's your responsibility to book that date. You've got to do your preparation, fill in your portfolio, and submit it usually 2 weeks in advance so the appraiser can go through your portfolio before the meeting. Then you go through your meeting. The meeting is a discussion. It's more about, how can we support you? How can you improve things, PDPs, etc. It's not a pass or fail. It's not like kind of your ARC, your ESRs where you're looking to make sure you tick above, a certain point. It's not a pass or fail. It's more supportive. And then they, at the end, write up their report and usually say there's nothing to worry about. But if there is, then they'll flag it up and give you a chance to change things, etc. So it's a supportive process. It's not a pass or fail.
And once again, I think I really need to emphasize it's not a pass or fail. In my medico-political roles, very rarely, but we did come across some people who had appraisers who treated it like you'd either pass your appraisal or you'd fail it. It should be a supportive process. So once again, guys, read about what your appraisal should be. Go onto the NHS England website and read what an appraisal should be, as well as the RCGP. Actually, it should be the RCGP, shouldn't it, Aman?
You get information on 2 or 3 different areas, to be honest. Yeah. They all have their own information on them.
But read about what's expected from you so that if you do get an appraiser that's asking something out of turn, and this is where your networking, your CPD group comes into play, because you can ask your colleagues if you feel something's not quite right. And if they're saying, actually, no, my appraiser didn't really say that I need to do 3 BLS courses or whatever, then you can look at what the true criteria is, because you will notice that there will be some variation from appraiser to appraiser. So just bear that in mind.
And don't worry about it. Honestly, don't worry about it. You got to do 5 appraisals. If you do 5 appraisals, fine. You basically get revalidation. That's the principle behind it. But the first appraisal generally is super chilled out from experience. So I really wouldn't worry too much about it. Just know a little bit about it, and treat it like you treat it now, but to a less level in terms of your ESR. And I guess number 10, we learned a lot about how general practice works. Well, not a lot. I say a little bit when you're in ST3. You kind of just get through the rows, but you know a bit about how general practice is right now because you've been in it for a year. But one thing we didn't really expect is just how fast the scene changes. And obviously, the last 18 months has changed even quicker. But I guess that took us a bit by surprise. Not you, because you knew about changes that were happening, but I certainly, with me, it kept changing, and it was hard for me to stay up to date. Without having those support groups and people to ask, and basically Pooja to say, what does this mean, because you know about it. But just be prepared that the GP that you're going to become in August, for example, is completely different to the GP you're going to be in 2 years' time, and having that ability to adapt, yes, from a clinical point of view, because obviously clinical stuff changes all the time, but also now you've got to be aware of all the changes that are happening on the ground in terms of how general practice is run, because it'll impact what jobs you apply for, it'll impact what you need to negotiate about, it'll impact what kind of things you need to ask at the interview. So if you don't know what super partnerships are, and you don't know what PCNs are or federations are, or what the future is, then when it comes to interview, it's going to stand out. So staying up to date is super important, isn't it?
Well, yeah, so GP fellowships are linked to PCNs. So that's why you need to know. For example, when we first started out and super partnerships came on board, there'd be salaried roles available where you'd be expected to have 1 base practice as a salary GP, but then the rest of your sessions could be at other practices that are part of the same super partnership or federation. And that's why it's really important to know about these changes. Or even, you know, in COVID times, there are new online providers that have come to the forefront, and you've now got those online remote consulting skills, and therefore you may be in a position to work for one of those providers. And the latest changes, ICSs, that are coming into play, and once again that will impact your working life as a GP. So just being aware of what's happening around you will make you more aware of opportunities, new schemes coming out, as well as keeping an eye on your contract and making sure it's relevant to the current situation, regardless of what role you do. So now a lot of PCNs, because NHS England have released a fund to develop locum banks. So even as a locum GP, this can affect you. So just be aware of what's happening around you, and just be prepared for rapid change happening as a GP.
Yeah. And be open to it, which is what you guys are, because you've done so much training and become GPs almost. So yeah, those are 10 things I think that when we look back and the things that we didn't think about enough, the number of choices that we needed to make or could make, how out of depth we might feel early on when we were locuming, just how much organization it needed to be a locum. We didn't really think about getting the money right initially, and then we got the right advice, and then we realized there's so much that we probably weren't doing exactly as we could have or to our benefit. And we didn't quite realize how many tough days there would be, and we probably didn't have a plan in place enough, I'd say. We certainly didn't self-promote early enough, but then we started to get much better at it, and then we got a lot more roles because of it. Networking, we learned to do in a massive way when we were GPs, much more than when we were GPSC3s. Partnership, we did think about, but now we know a lot more about what we should have thought about before we thought about partnership if we went down that road. We probably have feared appraisal way more than we needed to, but with understanding came a lot of reduction of that fear, and I don't think we realized just how much things were going to change, not from a clinical point of view, but from an on-the-ground point of view in terms of primary care. So if you can bear these things in mind, if you're coming up to CCT in a few months' time, if you're looking for PDPs to put in for your post-CCT, think about some of these things, because looking at how some of these things work might be a good one to put in terms of a PDP. The coupon is still active, CCT 15 for the online course, and for the flashcards, there's the farm cards as well. Thank you so much, guys. We're going to try and dig through some of the questions because there have been a few that have come in. Pooja, final few words before we do that.
Yeah, and just about making it relevant to your appraisal, this week we've launched our new online course, and the advantage, online course functions, and one of the advantages of the online course is that you can make notes. So actually, if your PDP is to learn more about locum life, you can do the course, make your notes, and download that PDF and upload it to your portfolio. So that's one of the things. We're just trying to make people's lives as easy as possible. So let's go through the questions, because that's really important to try and help you guys out.
So we might go silent while we start reading down these questions, guys, but we are still here.